Here we go, folks. Hi, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us at Secular AZ today. And if you are joining us, please feel free to put your name in the chat. And you want to switch it from hosts and panelists to everyone. As you all know, white Christian nationalism is the greatest threat to our democracy, and Secular AZ is your voice for the separation of religion and government. We are a nonprofit organization, and we act as your voice to elected officials all across the state and at every level. So be sure to check out all of our social media channels and like, subscribe, and share. Let's see. Oh yeah, my internet connection is unstable. That's true. Next week, we will be speaking with special guest Isabella Russian of the American Humanist Association. We'll be talking about secular voters, voter registration, state and national level registration, and engaging with local governments. But for today, I am very excited because today we're being greeted today by someone who is so important to the abortion access campaign and really has been just an Arizona treasure. Athena Salman is the Arizona Director of Campaigns for Reproductive Freedom for All, formerly NARAL. She served in the Arizona House of Representatives, where she was a fierce advocate for access to reproductive health care, including abortion, since she was first elected in 2016. In 2023, she established the Arizona Repro Table, a coalition of partners in Arizona working together to protect and advance reproductive rights. Athena was honored as a Secular AZ, Secular Star Lawmaker many times. We never really had to worry about Athena trying to slip in some bill that would mandate a moment of silence or anything silly like that. So welcome, Athena. Thank you so much for being here. Like I said, I'll probably keep my screen turned off today. So I'm going to just hand it right over to you, okay?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeannie. Thank you for having me today. It's so good to reconnect with the Secular Coalition. As Jeannie mentioned, when I was a state legislator, it was amazing to partner and do a lot of great organizing work at the Capitol to stand up for secular values. And now I get to continue that fight through the lens of reproductive freedom as the Director of Arizona Campaigns for Reproductive Freedom for All. I'm really excited to have this conversation today about what does abortion access, what's the current state of abortion access in Arizona, especially given that all eyes are on Arizona with how much we have been whiplash back and forth by the legislature, by the judges. Yeah, so a little bit about Reproductive Freedom for All really quick. We are a nationwide organization. We have 4 million members in every state and every congressional district in the country, including 75,000 members in Arizona, spanning throughout the state. And we've been around for 50 years. Recently, last fall, we went through a rebrand. We were formerly NARAL, Pro-Choice America, but part of the reason that the organization went through a rebranding event was so that we could really reflect the diversity and inclusivity of the reproductive freedom movement, acknowledging that, these rights are for everyone and everyone deserves the right to call their own shots about their bodily autonomy. Okay, so if I make this slideshow, is it full screen now?
Yes, it looks good.
Okay, cool. And then let me see if I can keep the chat open too. Feel free to ask questions as they come, or we can wait till the end. But I am going to give you all just a brief overview of the history, but more specifically what's happened over the past few months, and then ways to get involved. Oh, hi, Jean. Hi, Jean. It's good to see you. Okay, so how did we get here? For those who are unaware, Arizona has 41 more than 40 restrictions on abortion that currently exist in statutes. This was the case prior to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Arizona has been for quite some time a state that has been recognized as a hostile state to reproductive rights and access to abortion. This includes the fact that abortion seekers must go in for mandated counseling, where the state writes the script for those who are aware of the things that providers are mandated to tell patients. Many of them are, many pieces of that script are inaccurate or just quite frankly offensive and insensitive to what the pregnant person is experiencing. Abortion seekers must wait 24 hours before going back to get their abortion. As you can imagine, this creates a lot of burden for people who have to arrange for childcare. It's another expense, as you are aware, because of restrictions, and we are under a 15-week abortion ban. That means less providers are providing the service. And so that means some people have to travel, have to arrange for a hotel to stay overnight. These restrictions make it more difficult for people to access care. We have restrictions on medication abortion. Only doctors are allowed to provide that, even though more healthcare providers are able. It's within their scope of practice to do that. And to the point about there being limited physical locations for abortion care, the state also bans the use of telemedicine for medication abortions. And the state has law prohibiting the mailing of medication abortion, but when it comes to the mail, that is under the purview of the federal government, fortunately. I mentioned this, we restrict qualified healthcare professionals who can provide abortion care to only physician. We mandate, medically unnecessary restrictions on providers that don't apply to other healthcare providers. We require parental notice, restricting young people's access to abortion care, and we do not have public coverage for abortion care, and we ban the insurance providers who are providing coverage on the private market from covering that option as well. Why is this the case? Because there are extremists at every level of government. The anti-abortion movement has been working for decades and have been successful at getting extremists in key positions, both at the state level and in the federal government. This is what led to the U.S. Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, which guaranteed the federal right to abortion on June 22nd, 2022. And that is what allowed Arizona to have multiple abortion bans come into effect. If you all remember, in the aftermath to almost 2 years ago, when that decision was issued, less than 2 weeks later, the former Attorney General, Mark Brnovich, filed a motion with the Pima County Superior Court asking him to lift the injunction against the 1864 abortion ban that was in effect and up until 1973. When the Roe v. Wade decision was finalized. Some history for you all. The Court of Appeals had said that the total ban on abortion, the 1864 ban, was in effect and was legal. 2 weeks later, the United States Supreme Court in January of 1973 issued the Roe v. Wade decision, and then that decision was under an injunction until Mark Brnovich made that motion to lift the injunction. Our advocates, Planned Parenthood, a coalition of repro groups, fought to, and providers, coalition of providers, fought to, in the courts to stop the 1864 total ban on abortion from taking effect, arguing that because the legislature has spent countless years legislating on abortion and have recently passed the 15-week ban, that was what was the law of the land in Arizona and more relevant. And as you are aware, on April 9th, the Arizona Supreme Court, led by Ducey's handpicked extremists, resurrected the 1864 total ban on abortion, which is cruel. And if this law goes into effect, would be absolutely devastating to pregnant people seeking abortion care in Arizona. So fortunately, we have a governor and an attorney general who both are very supportive of reproductive freedom. Both of them, the right to abortion was central and a key component when they ran for office 2 years ago. And both Governor Hobbs and Attorney General Chris Mays has lived up to those promises. And I'm sure you all are aware of this, but we have both chambers hold a 2-seat anti-reproductive freedom majority. So, you know, when we're looking at the possibilities this cycle, when we are getting involved electorally, we are asking people who are wanting to be in the House and Senate what their positions are on abortion care, on contraception, on IVF, making sure, and basically bodily autonomy, making sure that the people who represent us are actually reflecting the 9 out of 10 Arizonans who support the legal right to abortion. And for folks who are familiar, nationwide, it's 8 out of 10 Americans support the legal right to abortion. So in Arizona, support for abortion rights is even higher than the national average. So what happened this session is allies and stakeholders, we got to work from the very next day after the Supreme Court decision was issued. When I resigned from the legislature, I was very, very deliberate and thoughtful in making sure that we had a vocal, articulate champion who would continue to carry the bill to repeal the total ban on abortion. I first introduced that legislation when I was in the state legislature in 2019. And the reason that myself with the Coalition of Reproductive Rights Stakeholders, which included Secular AZ at the time, we decided that we needed to run the bill to repeal the 1864 ban on abortion from over 100 years ago, was because we saw what Donald Trump had done with Neil Gorsuch. And in 2018, if you all remember, the Supreme Court had added Brett Kavanaugh, who had a very, very disturbing track record on the rights of women. So we saw this, even though Roe v. Wade at the time was still in effect, still the law of the land. We saw the direction that the court was heading, and we knew that when you keep these bills, these bad laws, even if they're under a court injunction, when you keep them on the books, you give the extremists the opportunity to just have that right moment where the right handpicked judge gets to supersede and overturn precedent and send us literally 160 years back in time. At the time when we were sounding the alarm, you know, people were like, oh, well, what's the big deal? Roe v. Wade, like, oh, well, this really isn't in effect. It's not, you know, and then fast forward, and Stephanie Stahl Hamilton was carrying HB 2677, ensuring that we had a bill ready to go in the event that the worst case scenario of the law coming back into effect happened, which it did. And so Democrats were ready to fight from day one. So on April 10th, the Dems tried to make the motion. It was blocked by the Republican House majority. And then the Senate president did something just unprecedented. He refused to even recognize the motion, even though the motion was made. That's a whole other tangent for another day about how the Republicans, you know, they pass the rules, they write the rules, and then we are also governed by Mason's manual. But when the rules don't fit them, suddenly the rules don't apply and they just violate and ignore. And, you know, it's a very, very uphill process. So the The next week, because the legislature was on a weekly schedule, the Speaker of the House blocked the effort again to advance 2677, even though they had a majority this time to vote to move forward with the bill. The Speaker Toma violated the rules and refused to let it move forward. And at the time when members tried to appeal the ruling of the chair, the Republican members who had sided with them to advance 2677, then sided with the Republican caucus to not appeal the ruling of the chair for violating the rules. So the effort had died that day. But fortunately, the Senate Democrats were able to force a late introduction of Senate Bill 1734. So we had a meter bill, which expedited the timeline that we could repeal this draconian law. April 24th, the Democrats passed and had a couple Republicans cross over the 2677. Procedurally, all the Democrats could do, all the legislature could do in the Senate was just second read. That's a constitutional requirement. They couldn't pass the bill on that day. And then the following week, May 1st, Jeannie, we were sitting together in the overflow room over the never ending 3-4 hour, it felt like a filibuster session. But they finally
I was
did
just
it.
saying in the chat. Yeah, I was just saying in the chat how it was better than any TV show that's ever aired on television.
Right. How long did it take everyone to figure out that Senator Bollock was telling her own abortion stories? It's like, this feels like a journal entry that I never wanted to listen to. But 3-4 hours later, the bill passed and was sent to the governor's desk, and the repeal got signed into law, which is, I mean, huge. For laws to take effect, it happens 90 days after sine die. There's anticipation and hope that the legislature, if they pass a budget this weekend, will sine die after, which would start the clock on when the repeal will officially take effect. But I really want to ground people into the fact that there has never been a time in Arizona history that hasn't had this law in the books. 1864 was the first legislature to ever convene in the entity, in the government, in the, eventual states of Arizona in our history. And so, I think like when we get these wins and when we make these historic efforts against all odds, I really do think that what we witnessed on May 2nd with the signing of that bill and repealing that law is starting a new era and a new day in our history where this ugly, ugly law that should have never been on the books will be a thing of the past. It took all hands on deck. Secular Arizona, your members were out there mobilized, Reproductive Freedom for All, so many other groups out there. It really took everyone on deck, full court effort, but we were able to do what had never been done in Arizona history. And, thank you to everyone who was raising your voices during that time period and making this happen. So as I just covered, it takes 90 days after sine die for this law to come into effect. There's no official end date, but there's hope that it's coming soon. And what we are already witnessing in the courts is that by repealing this law and repealing it so quickly, attorneys have more grounding in court to argue that the law should no longer take effect and be enforced since the legislature repealed it. And in actuality, if the court was to allow it to take effect, it would be effective for a week or two, maybe a month. And that would just be cruel and, legalese as to why that should not be the case. And again, thank goodness for Attorney General Mays. She has been such a champion every step of the way. I can't imagine And I've visualized the scenario of what if we had a Carrie Lake as governor? What if we had a Nabe Hamida as governor? Candidates and politicians who made very clear in their campaigns where their stance was on reproductive freedom. And those stances being very, very hostile. You know, at the time, Carrie Lake had said that she thought the 1864 law was a great law. And when the Supreme Court on April 9th issued their opinion, a few days afterwards, she was saying, giving interviews about how she thinks the sheriffs should be out there enforcing this law. And of course, Attorney General Mays securing that seat and winning that election by 287 votes. And without a doubt, if she had not been in that position, this thing, with the original timeline before the lawsuits started being filed after the court's decision, it was originally set to take effect a week ago. So, as we're having conversations with our loved ones this year, given that there's a big election happening and we're going to see a lot of things on the ballot, both fingers crossed, the ballot initiative, which Reproductive Freedom for All Arizona is proud to be a founding member of that coalition. We serve on the executive committee. But we're going to have candidates who need to make their stances clear on whether they stand with this issue. But everyone can point to Attorney General Mays as a shining example about how our voices matter, your votes matter, and elections have consequences. Yep, so delays, and you know what, this is outdated because now the implementation date is September 26th. So, and that's absent of further legal intervention. On August 12th is when the 45-day clock starts. And so around that time, we may see more legal action to try and push back that September 26th date and ultimately stop this thing from ever taking effect. And so everyone has a role to play, and your voice matters, and it's time to take action. So, stay mobilized. Secular Coalition is doing an incredible job organizing people. Reproductive Freedom for All, we are partnering with anyone and everyone who wants to flip the legislature to a reproductive freedom majority. Even if we pass the ballot initiative, we still need reproductive freedom champions who will work with us to get those 40 restrictions I talked about on abortion repealed and off the books. So we never even have to challenge those and put those up in front of Ducey's PAC Supreme Court. We are also working on making sure we're educating people about the fact that we're doing all this great work in states. But all of that's going to be for naught if we have people who are governing us who are successful and win in passing a national abortion ban. Like, that is the ultimate goal of the anti-abortion movement, is to make it irrelevant on whether or not you live in California or Florida or Arizona or Nevada. They want a nationwide abortion ban. These are some resources. Again, so right now, just to be crystal clear, the law that is in effect is abortion up till 15 weeks. And then the restriction is very, there was a very tragic article on a AZ family about a woman who had a very hard time and suffered a lot trying to access an abortion after 15 weeks. But these are resources, just so you're aware, keep them close. There are resources out there for folks who are seeking abortion care. And one more fun piece, one of the ways that we are going to secure and protect reproductive freedom and the right to abortion for the long term is by supporting the Arizona for Abortion Access Initiative. I'm pretty sure Secular Coalition, you all already endorsed the initiative and are backers of the right. So fortunately, your organization has already endorse the initiative. And this is the opportunity. This is our chance to amend the Arizona Constitution. So at least in Arizona, it won't matter what a politician or a judge decides, because it is a protected right in our highest governing document that governs the state, which is the Constitution. So we're in our final push of signatures. What this means, and tomorrow is like, please, 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 Saturday, June 15th, please, 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 if you have a petition with signatures, even if it's just one signature, please go to our website. These are just the locations I put on here. These are just a few of the many locations that we will have with notaries tomorrow. And we are asking everyone to turn in what they have. And if you still want to get signatures afterwards, you can pick up a blank petition there. But even if you have one on a sheet or 5 on a sheet, this is let's bring back everything in, because we are in our final stretch. We are turning in the signatures on July 3rd. That is the deadline, but we need all the signatures back beforehand, so that we can make sure everything's organized and ready to go. And this will be all across the state. There'll be people in Bisbee tomorrow, in Flagstaff, in West Phoenix, and Tempe, all over the state. It's not on here, but there will be a group of volunteers with the notary at Changing Hand bookstores in Tempe. So all over the state. And that's my presentation, but I am also here to answer any questions people have. And again, I'll stop the share. But again, it's like such a joy and a pleasure to join you all again today and continue the conversation around reproductive freedom in Arizona.
I have a hotspot, so hopefully that might help with the spotty internet today. So I want to talk a little bit about, and please, if you all have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. But one thing that I want to talk about is the connection between these bans that we're seeing of gender affirming care and the connection between that and abortion access. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the fundamental value of bodily autonomy, and how the anti-abortion extremists aren't just in this silo, right? They are working to violate and take away our freedoms across the board. That's why you don't see them just banning abortion. That's why you see them also, every single Republican in the state legislature, and just this past week, every Republican in the US Senate voted to block the Right to Contraception Act. That's why we saw in Alabama that a judge ruled that in vitro fertilization is illegal. And that's why we see them trying to deny people their right to gender affirming care. This is all about controlling what you can do with your body. And this is all about taking these life-saving, these life-altering decisions out of your hands and in control of politicians, of judges, of these, extremists who oftentimes are motivated by their religious viewpoints. And, like at the end of the day, like people can have their own personal beliefs around reproductive right, around abortion, but it is a violation to wield the power of the state to then impose that belief on everyone else, which is what we see happening across the board on so many issues, not just the right to abortion.
Well, and it even, it's about controlling people with disabilities too, or removing access from them, and somehow like even just minimizing their personhood and their autonomy. Like all of these things are connected. Okay, let's see. I saw some comments. Yes, in the hands of Jesus, says Mars. Ian says people are somehow skeptical that they would implement Project 2025 if they get the power to do so. But you can see so many examples in the state and local levels of this happening or being attempted right now, and the trajectory that it's headed in. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, what do you say, Athena, to like people if you cross paths with people who are on the fence or say, well, you know, there should be limitations, you know, I don't believe in these partial birth abortions, which like, you know, for full term abortions, which like totally aren't a thing. So like, how do you combat the mis and disinformation out there, especially when it's being sanctioned and spoken on the floor of the House and on the floor of the Senate?
Yeah, and that's a really good question that we get a lot because there is so much misinformation out there. And, you know, my full-time job is to think about this issue, to talk about this issue. And prior to this being in the legislature, like I was constantly thinking about political issues and our rights and freedoms. And I think for the average person, like it's like you're lucky if you get them to think about something like you know, for 5 minutes, because people have lives, they're busy, they're working multiple jobs. Um, and so when you have that captive audience, especially when you have like this deep relationship with the individual that you're trying to have this conversation with, there are two things that can lay the groundwork and move them from point A to point B. Number one is highlighting the values that are at stake, right? You know, I think one thing I will underscore for people is the reproductive rights movement. We don't really use the verbiage of being pro-choice. Like even when you just think about language and vocabulary, like choices are like things like I'm going to choose what movie I'm going to watch or what streaming service. Am I going to watch? Am I going to look on Netflix tonight or Hulu? Like I'm going to choose what I'm going to eat for dinner, right? It sounds trivial, right? And so the movement has moved away from that dichotomy of pro-choice, pro-life, we talk about it in terms of values, right? It is about our freedom, right? And we talk about it through the network and the lens of um, these reaffirming like empathy and really describing what's at stake here. So it's about reproductive freedom. It's about someone's right to self-determination. You have the decision. And so again, decision is a really, really important word, but you have the decision making power to decide if and when to start or grow your family. And it should be your decision on the means in which to do that or not do that. So I think that's a key piece. The other piece that I think is very, very moving to people and takes a little bit of vulnerability is sharing your personal story. There is nothing more powerful ever than personal stories. And so if you've had an abortion, if someone you loved having an abortion, if it's your decision to decide what to share from those stories. But the reality is everyone loves someone who's had an abortion. And I think what we've seen with our conversations out there is that you're really able to reshape and get people to see the issue through a broader lens by just these real life examples and of stories. And if you don't have a personal story, like even just that, you know, thank you for sharing it in the chat of the AZ family article I was referencing to, like everyone can agree no woman deserves to almost die because a bunch of extremist politicians decided to restrict her right to terminate her pregnancy. And so lifting up those stories too, I think is really important.
And I appreciate you saying, you know, I get so sick and tired of mostly men correcting people's speech on the topic of abortion. Oh, it's pro-choice, you know, nobody wants to have, maybe somebody does want to have an abortion because it's not the right time for them, like to have a baby. So please don't police my language. They really like to do it on Chris Love's Twitter feed, which I live for, to be quite honest, because she's great at eviscerating people who try to tell her how to speak. And she was the one 4 years ago who had the foresight to say, yeah, we're not going to endorse anybody who gets police money. And she saw the connection and policing, and she saw what was going to happen. I can so easily always turn these into a Chris love session. Let's see. Erica says, I haven't read the letter of the ballot proposition. Does it have good safeguards against the kind of Roe era shenanigans like mandatory tests, counseling, waiting periods, etc.?
What the initiative does, it's very simple. It's less than a page long. Um, but what it does is it guarantees the right to abortion up until fetal viability, and then at fetal viability, that decision remains intact for between the pregnant person and the provider in the event that there is healthcare necessities to have that abortion. So it goes beyond it closely mirrors Roe, but you know, at the end of the day, it creates a fundamental right to abortion in the Constitution that doesn't exist, and that's part of the reason why we have the 1864 ban, the 15-week ban. You know, they'll come up with another ban. There's still some bans that are on the books that are just waiting for a lawsuit to happen that can be resurrected from the dead. It's a pretty clean cut, simple language. And the other piece too is it has to be that way because we have pretty strict requirements with constitutional amendments about single subject. So it also is very much tailored to make sure that it is just pertaining to that one subject.
Okay, and I think this is more of a comment. Angie says, if women don't have the same rights in all states, they are not full US citizens in all states. It sure feels like that. Yeah, for sure. While you were speaking, and she's still over here. I'm at this, I think it's called the Copper Center or something like that, but there's a healthcare rising volunteer over there. She just got like a whole row of, 18 to 25-year-olds to sign the petition. I love it. It's great.
That's awesome.
So, okay, let's talk a little bit about, how many signatures, remind me again exactly how many signatures this ballot needs to make, or this needs to get on the ballot.
So the signatures required are about, I think like 200, or I'm sorry, 300, like 60,000, more than that. But we have the ambitious goal of doubling that. So our goal as a coalition is to get around 800,000. And what you just described, Jeannie, of the folks getting the signatures and getting every single last person out there who hasn't signed, there are still people who haven't signed who want to sign and they just need to be asked. So we're making good progress, but we need everyone to get their signatures in.
And this woman right here is exactly the volunteer that you would want, because she is stopping absolutely everybody as she makes her way out of the building. I love it. She said she was one of the first people in Cochise County to get the petition. So good for her. Anyway, there is a question in here. Hold on just a second. Oh, this is a great question, because I've heard about this in places like Idaho where they have, even more restrictive bans. Have you noticed that fewer doctors want to train or serve in states that restrict their ability to practice medicine? Great question.
Yeah, that is an effect that's happening. And one of our coalition partners, Jody Liggett, she founded an institute called the Arizona Center for Women's Empowerment. And I know she has just completed some research. So she's working on finalizing the report. And so it's worth having her as a speaker in the future to really talk about and go into depth about what the effects are. But unfortunately, that is one of the effects that she has found, that other studies have found, is when a state is hostile to reproductive health care, including abortion care, it's less likely that people are going to want to do their residencies there, that people are going to want to stick around and build their practice there. The workforce ends up going to another state where they can actually do the work that they want to do.
And there was a piece recently on NPR about the Florida ban that recently went into place, and they were talking to abortion providers and surrounding, like, it really is going to just throw them into a whirlwind of just, I mean, they've already been so busy, and now without the care that folks were able to receive in Florida, all their surrounding states, like, I mean, it's bananas how far the people in that part of the country have to travel to access abortion health care. It is inhumane. It's awful. Ian says, I've been working with Indivisible's efforts who had a goal of getting 22,000 plus signatures, and I'm pretty sure we got it and then some. It's very heartening to see. It sure is, man. I've never seen people like dig in and get into this as you know, quickly as they did and as confidently. I mean, like just really passionately. Let's see. Bonnie has a question here. Did I hear Trump saying exceptions must be made for rape and incest? Goes against all those singing church trumpers in our gallery who want a total ban. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was so creepy. Bonnie, I know was there. I don't know how she has the stomach for it, but that's a really disturbing trend we're seeing right now at the state capitol. Yeah.
And a few years back, what law was it? When the legislature was repealing the I mean it was derogatory named, it was the no promo homo law on sex education. The former lobbyist Tori Roberg was in the gallery and sat near some of Kathy Herod's volunteers who were speaking in tongues while that was happening. But Jeannie, on the issue of Trump, and this is really important for people on the call to know because he has been doing a lot of interviews around abortion rights, and he's been all over the map in terms of what he says he supports and what he says he believes. Trump lies. He's a liar. At the end of the day, his actions speak louder than words, and he is taking credit for stacking the court with anti-abortion extremists who were instrumental in overturning 50 years of legal precedent under Roe v. Wade. He is taking credit for that. So, you know, when people are like, well, Trump said that he supports up to this many weeks, or he says he supports exceptions for rape or incest, he lies. He lies. He will say whatever he needs to say to con people into getting him what he wants. So I think we need to be super diligent this year in educating people about what happens and about what his stance is, which is not supporting abortion rights. Then one more point I'm going to make, because I think this is really crucial for everyone to hear. When Reproductive Freedom for All, when we talk about abortion, a lot of messengers on this issue try to really reduce it around, oh, this is so extreme because it doesn't have exceptions for rape or incest. But even in states that have exceptions for certain scenarios like rape or incest, those survivors still cannot get abortion care. Exceptions don't work. That is why a ban, regardless of what's in it, a ban is cruel and it impacts everyone. And so as you're having these conversations, I know that people want to pull you into this, oh, but exceptions don't work. In the states that have them, they don't work. And the people who need care cannot get them. That's why we need to make sure that when someone decides to have an abortion, that it is affordable, that it is accessible, and that it is free of punishment and judgment. And, you know, that's the bottom line.
Okay, let's see. So Lindsay has the research there. 22% of OBGYNs have left Idaho since Dobbs. Diane says at several places, the LD5 meeting and Tehran rally, everyone said, oh, you won't get any signatures because everyone will have signed. Wrong. I got signatures at both places. Recently in Pima County, the women said they had never even heard of it, but signed. So don't ask. There are people out there who want to sign it. I think she meant to say ask, don't assume. Yes, she did. Okay. Ian has a question here. So Ian says suppose the voters pass this initiative this November and pro-repro candidates win the Arizona House and Senate. What would your wish list be for specific things they could get enacted to further repro rights?
So this was that's a great question, Ian, and this is the scenario of what happened with Michigan. In Michigan, and their initiative was actually, this is before we rebranded, but their initiative and campaign was called Reproductive Freedom for All. So before we rebranded, but when that initiative had passed, They also got a trifecta. They got a Repro Freedom majority in both chambers, and they had a Democratic governor who was supportive of the right to abortion. And so the first thing that we need to do is repeal the 40 restrictions that exist on abortion care. Like that is, you know, as we have witnessed on paper, our rights only mean so much. But without the politicians who are down to defend them, it's a risk that we don't want to take. So they were able to do the 1-2, get their constitution amended, get these nasty laws off the books. That is like the first most immediate need that needs to happen. And then we need to take steps to affirmatively protect the right to abortion care, the right to contraception, people's decisions and ability to access IVF, making sure that's protected, and even surrogate laws. Arizona has some pretty bad surrogate laws that has made one of our members at our lobby day said that because of our surrogate laws, she did not want to be a surrogate for someone who had approached her and would have to go to another state in order to do it, right? So even like really we have to like dig into our statute and figure out what changes needed to be made in order to protect all the decision making that happens around reproductive health care and exercising those decisions. So I think those are some of the pieces, and there's so much federal funding that could support this work. If we had a government that cared, if we provided some state funding towards family planning, we are one of the fewer states in the country that doesn't provide any dollars towards family planning. Family planning, the Title X program, that's access to birth control, that's STI treatment, that's pre-cancer screenings for low-income people who don't have access to healthcare. It's a whole slew of healthcare services. And so there's just so much opportunity because this has been an area that has just quite frankly been neglected. And then one more piece that's not as much on the hard technical healthcare front, but is integrated and related to being able to access healthcare is our organization is very, very big. And we very much support paid family medical leave. And that is, as someone who just gave birth to 2 daughters over the past 2 years, having that time for A, to bond with my children, and B, for my body to recover, which, even in 6 months, it's almost been a year since my last kid, and I'm still like having some health problems over it. Like anyone who's given birth knows that it's not a cakewalk or a walk in the park. And it is cruel that most states in this country doesn't offer it, and that we don't have any federal guarantee. But that is something that we are very committed to and will be pushing when we get a trifecta that supports reproductive freedom. And that is fundamental to reproductive freedom.
I don't know if you said this, but I'd add to the list too and funding for crisis pregnancy centers, so-called crisis pregnancy centers. And I'd also like to see, more protections too for like midwives, or if people want to make this, like a whole other thing about, they want to try to dictate how your birth should be instead of like allowing people to determine their own healthcare choices too, and what they're going to fund.
That's right.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna look, let's see. Yes, thank you for posting the video of Anthony Kern speaking in tongues. It's the creepiest thing. Ian
So
wants
creepy.
to, it's so gross. Ian wants to know if he can learn speaking in tongues via Duolingo. Now that would be great. You basically just repeat Shamala Hamala over and over again. Like that's what you do. And also I did point out too, and I don't remember what organization she's with. It's like Secular Jews for Justice or something like that. But Katie Reeder, she is in Tucson now, but she came from Michigan, and she was there really working on flipping Michigan. So I'm convinced that with Katie Reeder's help now, she's just going to bring all that good blue wave over here to Arizona. So hopefully that's the case. Oh, good. Yeah, somebody learned something. Stephen says, I didn't know about the move away from pro-choice, and I'm grateful.
And
Thank you. Yes.
Jeannie, I have a follow-up to that. Stephen, thank you for that comment. We are doing a membership canvas in Phoenix and North Phoenix. So inviting people and talking to voters and inviting them to become members of our organization. And we're a nonpartisan organization, so we're talking to everyone, unaffiliated voters, Democratic voters, Republican voters. And even with Republican voters who we are talking to, having the name and coming at this issue from a freedom framework really is resonating and speaking to people and opening up a conversation. And so a lot of our new members, or a good portion of them, are also Republican too. So, just I know it's hard to retrain ourselves to uh, talk about issues in a different frame. But, that is one of the things about backing away from pro-choice and really starting to pull out the values that have underscored and what we have always intrinsically felt and known to be true, but actually saying it out loud so that people can make that connection as well. That's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for freedom.
Okay, I just thought of one more thing that would be on my wish list, and that would be funding for religious foster and adoption agencies. I don't want to fund them anymore. So there's that. Okay, I think I'm done now. All right, I don't see any more questions here. And given the fact that I know that Pride has started across the street, I'm going to go ahead and start to close this out. And I do the same thing. I ask the same question because a lot of times these Friday discussions, because we have people who are really doing the deep research, on like Christian nationalism stuff, and it's pretty terrible. Or they're telling us about like their horrible spiritual abuse when they were raised or whatever. So this is, I think, a little bit more hopeful, but it is kind of, we are in a really divided time, right? Like, so in doing this work, what gives you hope, Athena Salman?
Okay, that's a really good question. I dropped the link in our chat too. If you want to become a member with us, sign up and stay in the loop about what's happening with reproductive freedom. What's giving me hope is the fact that when you see abortion on the ballot every single election cycle, whether it's a midterm election, a presidential election, a special election, the issue is winning. It is winning. And I think it's winning because people are fed up and people understand that their freedoms are at stake. And so there's a lot of energy and momentum. It gives me a lot of confidence and hope too, just constantly repeating the fact that 9 out of 10 Arizonans support the legal right to abortion. We are in an environment where the anti-movement is so loud, especially religious extremists are so loud and take up so much space that we're gaslighted to think, oh, that's a lot of people who believe this like very far out thing. No, 9 out of 10 Arizonans. So when you're sitting in a coffee shop, Jeannie, and there's 10 people in there, 9 of them are with us. And so I think that we really have a strong foundation to continue to fight for our freedoms, and ultimately we're going to win. So it's very exciting. And thanks to all the work that you all are doing. Thank you for your engagement and your volunteerism and raising your voices. If that wasn't powerful, then that and extremist movement, they wouldn't try to be shutting it down. So, we're what's up.
That's exactly right. I mean, all they've got is declined to sign. It's not very creative. I've got one of these like ultra MAGA people down the street from my house. Like it's like a bunker. But yeah, that's all they can come up with is decline to sign. And this is my mantra because I agree with you. I've been saying it over and over again. They are loud, but we are many. Anthony Kern can go to his little church and get these people to show up and speak in tongues or do whatever and make a big scene about it. But at the end of the day, they are loud, but we are many. So, and Kid Rock, what? Wait, what? I don't get the Kid Rock. thing. Anyway, all right. Well, with that, wait, maybe they'll explain it here because I'm so confused. Oh, they have Kid Rock. Yeah, they totally do. And
Oh, okay. I didn't get it either. So I
I
was
was
like,
so
what?
confused.
I was like, is he a white nationalist? Like what?
Kid Rock is looking rough these days.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
I'm gonna let you get back to your beautiful children and your awesome husband. And I hope you have a great weekend. And I hope everybody else has a great weekend. And
And turn in your petition. Turn in your petition.
that's right. And if you are in Cochise County, because who doesn't want to be in Cochise County, stop on by. I'll be here today and tomorrow. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.